What would you do if a stranger grabbed your daughter by the throat and had no idea who you really were? This isn't a movie. This really happened. A 16-year-old boy wrapped his hand around a girl's neck.
To
Right in the
control
middle
the
of
fight,
school hallway,
you must first
in
control
front of
yourself.
dozens of kids. He thought he
Maya,
was just bullying another
that is where
quiet
real
girl
power begins.
who wouldn't fight back. He had no idea her father was a UFC champion. And within hours, that boy would learn the hardest lesson of his life. Not through violence, but through something far scarier. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how one father turned a school's worst day into a lesson none of them will ever forget. Now, before we get into how this all played out, let me take you back to where it started. Because to really understand why this moment hit so hard, you need to know who this girl was and why nobody at that school had any clue her father really was. Her name was Maya. She was 15 years old. And if you walked past her in the hallway, you'd probably never notice her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't popular. She liked to draw in the corner of her notebook during class, and she kept mostly to herself. She had just switched school that year. New town, new faces, new rules to figure out. And there was one thing about Maya that almost nobody knew. Her dad wasn't just some guy who dropped her off in a quiet black truck every morning. Her dad had spent years training, fighting, and competing at the highest level of mixed martial arts. He'd won titles. He'd been on television. People who followed the sport knew his name. But Maya never talked about it. Not because she was ashamed, but because she didn't want to be the fighter's daughter. She just wanted to be Maya. So at this new school, nobody knew. Not the teachers. Not the other students. And definitely not the boy who was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. The trouble had actually started weeks before that hallway moment. It just built up slowly, the way these things usually do. His name was Tyler, and everybody at school knew who he was. He was tall for his age, loud, and used to getting his way. Teachers were tired of dealing with him. Other kids just stayed out of his path. And somehow, Tyler had picked Maya as his target. It started small. A shove in the hallway that looked like an accident. A comment about her drawings, loud enough for other kids to hear and laugh. Maya never said anything back. She just put her head down and kept walking. That's usually how it works, isn't it? The quiet ones get picked first, because bullies think quiet means weak. But here's the thing nobody at that school understood. Maya wasn't quiet because she was scared. She was quiet because her father had raised her to handle things with her head, not her fists. He always told her, words don't need to turn into anything more unless someone forces your hand. So she kept walking, kept her head down, kept hoping it would pass. It didn't. On that Thursday morning, Tyler was in a worse mood than usual. Nobody really knew why. Maybe he got in trouble at home. Maybe he just wanted an audience. Either way, when he saw Maya at her locker, something in him decided that today was the day he'd go further than words. He walked up behind her, said something under his breath, and when she tried to walk away, he grabbed her, not her arm, not her backpack, her throat, right there, in a hallway full of students between classes. His hand closed around her neck and pushed her back against the lockers. Her books hit the floor. A few kids gasped. One girl pulled out her phone. For a few seconds, nobody moved. That's what happens in moments like this. People freeze, because their brain can't quite believe what it's watching. Now here's where the story splits into two paths happening at the exact same time. While Maya was struggling against those lockers, 40 minutes away, her father's phone buzzed with a text from the front office. He was in the middle of a training session, wrapping his hands for a sparring round, when he saw the message on the screen. Please come to the school immediately. There's been an incident involving Maya. He didn't know the details yet. Not the throat, not the lockers, not the phone recording that was already being passed around group chats. All he knew was one sentence. Something happened to his daughter, and for a man who had spent his whole career staying calm under pressure, walking into a cage against people trying to hurt him, this was the one kind of pressure he'd never trained for. He grabbed his keys, and he didn't say a word to anyone on his way out. By the time he reached the school, the parking lot was already a mess of confusion. A few police cars weren't there yet, but two staff members stood outside, talking in low voices, clearly not expecting what was about to walk through that door. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked through those front doors the same way he walked into every fight of his career. Calm, focused, completely silent. That's the part people don't expect. When you picture a father storming into a school after something like this, you probably picture yelling, slamming doors, maybe even threats. He did none of that. He walked straight up to the front desk and said 4 words. "Where's my daughter?" Not a question, a statement. The woman at the front desk looked up, and for a second, her face changed. She recognized him, not as Maya's dad, as him, the guy she watched fight on pay-per-view 2 years ago with her husband, the guy whose face had been on the cover of a sports magazine, sitting in the waiting room right behind her. She actually said his name out loud, almost like she couldn't stop herself. And the second she said it, another staff member's head turned too. Word moves fast in the school. Within minutes, teachers who had no idea who Maya's father even was were suddenly whispering to each other in the hallway. "Wait, that's him? The fighter?" Here's the thing, though. He didn't come there looking for a fight. If you'd seen his face in that moment, you wouldn't have seen anger. You would have seen something closer to a man trying very, very hard to stay in control of himself. Because losing control was an option. Not here. Not as a father standing in his daughter's school.
He was led down the hallway to the nurse's office, where Maya was sitting with an ice pack against her neck, her eyes red from crying. The second she saw him, something in her just broke, and she stood up and hugged him without saying a word. He held her for a long moment, longer than anyone in that room was comfortable with. Nobody rushed him. Nobody said anything. When he finally let her go, he turned to the principal, who had just walked in, clearly nervous, clearly unsure what to expect. And he asked one quiet question. "Where is the boy who did this?" Not loud, not threatening, just steady, like a man who already knew exactly what he wanted to happen next, and was giving the school one chance to handle it the right way. The principal opened his mouth to explain the school's process, the investigation, the paperwork. He was cut off with a second sentence, just as calm as the first. "I'm not asking about your process. I'm asking where he is." The principal led him down the hallway toward the office where Tyler was already sitting, waiting for his parents to arrive. A staff member had pulled him out of class the moment the incident was reported, and he'd been sitting there for almost 20 minutes, arms crossed, looking more annoyed than afraid. That changed the second the door opened. Maya's father stepped into the doorway and just stood there for a moment, saying nothing. Tyler looked up, confused at first, not understanding who this stranger was or why the principal looked so tense standing next to him. Then it clicked. This was her dad. Tyler's whole posture changed. He sat up straighter, his arms uncrossed. And for the first time that day, he looked like exactly what he was, a scared teenager who suddenly realized he might have made a very big mistake. Here's where the story could have gone a completely different way. A lot of people, watching their child get hurt like that, might have lost their temper, might have said something they regretted, might have made this about revenge instead of accountability. He didn't raise his voice. He pulled up a chair, sat down across from Tyler, and asked him one simple question. "Why did you put your hands on her?" Tyler stammered. He tried to explain it away, said it was just a joke that got out of hand, said he didn't mean to grab her that hard. The usual excuses kids give when they're caught and scared of what comes next. Maya's father just listened. He didn't interrupt. He let the boy talk himself into silence. Then he said something that surprised everyone in that room, including the principal. "You know, I've had my hands around a lot of necks. Professionally. People who trained for years, who knew exactly what they were doing, who agreed to be there. And even then, we have rules. We have people watching to make sure nobody gets hurt in ways they can't come back from." He leaned forward slightly. "You put your hands on a 15-year-old girl who never agreed to anything, who never had a chance to defend herself. Do you understand the difference between what I do and what you did?" Tyler didn't answer. He just stared at the floor. That's when Tyler's parents walked in, out of breath, clearly having rushed straight from work. And that's when the story took an unexpected turn. Because Tyler's mother, seeing her son sitting there, close to tears, said something under her breath that Maya's father happened to hear. "Not again." "Tyler, what did you do this time?" 2 words caught his attention. Again. And this wasn't the first incident. And the way she said it, tired, almost defeated, told him something else. This wasn't really about a bad kid enjoying hurting someone. Something else was going on at home, something that had been building in this boy long before he ever crossed paths with Maya. For a moment, Maya's father sat back in his chair, and the anger in his eyes softened, just slightly, into something closer to understanding. Not forgiveness.
Not yet.
But understanding. He looked at the principal and said, I still want this handled properly. But maybe start by asking why a kid feels like the only power he has is putting his hands on someone smaller than him. The room went quiet. The next 20 minutes changed the direction of everything. The principal called Tyler's parents into a separate room to talk about next steps, and for the first time all day, Maya's father was left alone in the hallway with just Maya standing beside him. She hadn't said much since he arrived. She just stayed close to him, still holding that ice pack against her neck. He crouched down so he was eye level with her, the same way he probably did when she was little and scared of something. Why didn't you ever tell me this had been happening? He asked quietly. Maya's eyes filled up again. Because I didn't want you to think I couldn't handle it myself. You always say I don't need you to fix everything. And that's when something shifted in him. Because she was right. He had told her that. He'd raised her to be strong on her own, to think before reacting, to not depend on his name or his reputation to solve her problems. But somewhere along the way, she'd taken that lesson and turned it into silence. Into hiding pain instead of asking for help. He pulled her into another hug, and this time, he said something he probably should have said a long time ago. Being strong doesn't mean you handle everything alone. It means you know when to ask for backup. That's what family is for. That was the real turning point of the whole story. Not the confrontation with Tyler. Not the reveal of who he was. This quiet moment in a school hallway between a father and his daughter. Meanwhile, in the other room, something else was happening. The principal came back out and asked Maya's father to rejoin the conversation, along with Tyler's parents. This is where he made a decision that surprised everyone. He didn't push for the harshest punishment possible. He didn't demand Tyler be expelled on the spot, even though the school made it clear that was an option given the severity of what happened. Instead, he asked for something different. A few days later, Maya went back to school. Her father walked her in that first morning, not because she asked him to, but because he wanted to. The hallway felt different this time. Kids who never noticed her before were now glancing over, whispering. Not the same whispers from before, though. This time it wasn't about her being an easy target. It was something closer to respect. A few kids even came up and told her they were sorry about what happened, that they should have said something when they saw it going on. Tyler kept his word too. A week later, in front of the same group of students who'd witnessed the hallway incident, he apologized to Maya. It wasn't smooth or perfectly worded. He stumbled over a few sentences, clearly uncomfortable. But it was real, and everyone in that hallway could tell the difference. He started seeing the school counselor twice a week. Nobody knew exactly what was happening at home for him, and honestly, that wasn't the story anyone needed to know. What mattered was that somebody finally noticed a kid heading down a bad path, and instead of just punishing him and moving on, someone stepped in and asked why. As for Maya, something changed in her too. She started talking more in class. She even started telling a few close friends what her dad actually did for a living, something she'd kept quiet for months. Not because she wanted the attention, but because she finally understood that where she came from and who her father wasn't something to hide. It was something that made her feel safe enough to stop hiding altogether. Her father never once brought up what he did at the school again. He didn't need to. Everyone in that building already knew who he was, and more importantly, they knew what kind of man he actually was underneath the reputation. Not someone looking for a fight. Someone who showed up, stayed calm, and made sure his daughter never had to feel that scared and alone again. If there's one thing this story really teaches us, it's this. Real strength isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about knowing exactly when to hold back and choosing to protect instead of punish, even when you have every reason not to. He didn't need to throw a single punch that day. He just needed them to know who was watching. If this story moved you, or made you think differently about the quiet kids in your own life, let me know down in the comments. Have you ever seen something like this happen, where someone finally stepped in when nobody else would? And if you want more stories like this one, where the quiet ones turn out to have the loudest backup, make sure you subscribe, because this definitely isn't the last time someone picked the wrong family to mess with. He asked that Tyler be required to sit down with a counselor regularly, not just as a punishment, but as actual help. He said if there really was something going on at home, expelling him and sending him somewhere with even less support wasn't going to fix anything. It would just move the problem down the road to someone else. But he was also clear about one thing. There had to be real consequences too. Tyler would face suspension. There would be a formal record of what happened. And there needed to be a direct apology to Maya in front of the people who witnessed it, not just a quiet note passed along by the school. Tyler's parents, still shaken, agreed to all of it without argument. Before they left the room, Maya's father turned to Tyler one last time. I hope you use this as the moment things change for you, not the moment your life gets worse. That part is up to you now. It wasn't the ending anyone expected walking into that school that day. No punches thrown. No lawsuit threats. No headlines about a UFC fighter losing his temper. Just a father who chose to fight for his daughter in the one way that actually mattered.